Hello, this is Shan Chandrasekhar welcoming you to another delightful part of our programming. As part of the Achievers, we featured some of the finest, highly accomplished people from around the world. We are very honored to feature an extremely distinguished guest in our studio here with us today. He is the Ambassador of United States of America to Canada, none other than His Excellency Mr. David Cohen. What a pleasure, sir, to welcome you.
Shan, thank you very much for having me in your building and having me on your air.
What an impressive background. You were selected by the President of the United States, Mr. Joe Biden, and you were unanimously approved immediately by the Senate, not just by majority vote, but unanimously approved. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. These days, I'm not sure you can get the United States Senate to unanimously agree that the sky is blue. So I feel honored, and I have a lot of relationships in the Senate that I've developed over many years, and I feel honored to have, obviously, the President's confidence, but also the confidence of the United States Senate.
You've got an extraordinarily impressive background, which we are going to go into during the course of the interview from the corporate world. What attracted you towards Canada to become the ambassador and choose this country?
Well, you don't always just get to choose a country. I was fortunate in that the President, when he was considering appointing me as an ambassador, asked me if I had a thought about where I'd like to go. And my answer to him was, I want to go to a big country. I want to go to a country with complicated issues. I want to go to a country that's important to the United States. But most importantly, I want to go to a country that's important to you. And I think that Canada met every one of those criteria. And I was honored when he called me and said, in his words, I'm going to send you to Canada. And it's been great being here. I arrived in December of 2021, and it's just been an incredible 21 months. The country is big, it's complicated, it's interesting. The people are engaged and they're nice. And it is a country whose relationship is extremely important to the United States.
So what are your priorities, with respect to the U.S.-Canada relations at the present and going forward?
I benefited from the fact that in February of 2021, right after President Biden was elected, the President and the Prime Minister agreed on a roadmap for a renewed partnership between Canada and the United States. Everything from building back better, is building our economies back after the pandemic, to taking on the pandemic and making sure that we don't have another pandemic. It had defense objectives. Most importantly, on a personal level for me, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility was a stated goal for our two countries. And I've made that a centerpiece of the work that Mission Canada does here in Canada. And taking on climate change, which I think is an existential issue for Canada, the United States, and the world. So that's the basic set of priorities that I've pursued and that really our embassy has pursued, as well as all the consulates across Canada.
I'm fascinated by the fact that you mentioned the word diversity, and of course you talked about sustainability as well when you talked about the environment. But when it comes to diversity, you actually were very instrumental in building a massive organization in the United States. Comcast is one of the world's largest communication companies. In the United States, for that matter, it had, just as an example, recently it had a net profit of about $14.8 billion in terms of operating income, $121 billion in revenue, $285 billion in assets. Now, with a company like that, you were not only their advisor, but prior to that, you were the executive vice president for a number of years, building the entire corporate group. But one of the areas, in addition to your corporate responsibility and your legal background and your business background, you were the first chief diversity officer for such a large corporation. I was fascinated when I heard about it, so tell me about it.
Well, diversity and inclusion is something that matters to me personally. It has through my entire career. When I came to Comcast, although there wasn't any such title as Chief Diversity Officer, I I basically raised my hand and volunteered, said I want to work and make sure that Comcast is the most diverse and inclusive company in the Fortune 100. And I think we were successful in doing that. So I come to this from a lot of elements of my background, but once I was in a media company, I saw the power of media. And I've seen it walking through this building with you. Television is really powerful, even with all the problems and issues on television distribution, and we've talked about piracy and the ability to get people to watch TV. If you want to reach a large number of people and you want to have a lot of impact on how they think about any subject, television remains the most important medium for accomplishing that objective. And given that that is the case, television and media is a central element of any diversity strategy.
Wow.
One of my favorite sayings in the diversity world is, if you can see it, you can be it.
Wow.
And what that means to me in the media space is, for a young black boy, a young Indian girl, if you can't turn on the television set and see people who look like you succeeding in the world, you have no aspiration to be like that.
Wow.
And that it's the power of media that enables you to advance the ball of diversity, which is why I've always been such a fan of networks like ATN, because you're out there on a daily basis showing young people, older people, what they can be, that they are part of mainstream and whatever society they live in this case in Canada, and there's no substitute for diverse television networks in driving home the diversity and inclusion message.
You made those conscious changes within your own organizations as well. What a business that you built, because in addition to Universal Studios, NBC, and CNBC, MSNBC, but you also, Telemundo, for the first time when you acquired, you gave it a completely different shape, from where it was originally. So tell me about that incredible strategy in terms of diversification.
Well, it's both diversification and diversity. I mean, from a Comcast perspective, the acquisition of NBC Universal was a major diversification play. There's always in the cable industry, probably still is, a bit of a discussion of, do you want to distribute content or do you want to own the content? And Brian Roberts, who was the CEO of Comcast, he always said, I want to do both. I want to own the content and I want to distribute the content. That's the best place to be. And so acquiring NBC Universal was a diversification play, but it was also a diversity play, because it enabled us to practice our commitment to diversity and inclusion on a real basis. So, you mentioned CNBC. Look at the anchors on CNBC.
Yeah.
A lot of women, a lot of people of color. You talk about NBC Universal and Universal theme parks, a lot of diversity at those theme parks. It's not just a bunch of white cartoon characters. There's a lot of diversity present. When you talk about our entertainment programming, there is a real commitment to diverse actors, diverse directors, diverse producers, and appealing to a diverse audience. And I think that's what makes our company successful and what makes it powerful. I call it the business case for diversity. If we have content that appeals to people of every diverse group, we will be more successful. And it's why Comcast always has such a robust lineup of international and foreign language and diverse channels. And there are all sorts of firsts. So one of my favorites, I'm a big Telemundo fan. I don't speak Spanish, but I'm a big Telemundo fan. And one of my favorite things that we did is Jose Diaz-Balart, who was a friend of mine, and he was basically the lead anchor on Telemundo. We also put him on the NBC network news on Saturday nights. So he became the first cross-language talent between a mainstream broadcast news station and a foreign language station. So at the same time he was an anchor on Telemundo, he was an anchor on NBC Nightly News on Saturday nights. And that's a real commitment to diversity.
I'm sure that would have also brought a tremendous amount of a newer audience to the mainstream NBC channel as well.
Correct. That's the theory. That's exactly what the theory is. I mean, he was an established Spanish language talent.
Right.
And when he started showing up on NBC Nightly News, we were growing our Hispanic audience on NBC Nightly News.
You're also one of the pioneers in the field of animation. So tell us about animation.
So people always assume that the Walt Disney Company is the #1 company in the world on animation. We had the good fortune of creating a business relationship with a artistic genius by the name of Chris Melandrani, creator of the Minions.
Oh, yes.
And so all those Minion movies, and then he also has done other animation specials, and the Universal Animation Studio and the films that are produced out of it is now a leading animation studio in the world.
So what was it like to transform from the corporate world to the government?
So it was a little bit of an adjustment, although I've done it before, because previously in my career, I was a practicing lawyer, I was a corporate lawyer, and then I went off and did politics. So I was.
And you were with a law firm which is within the top 100 law firms.
Right, one of the 100 largest law firms. But I also left the law firm and was chief of staff to the mayor of Philadelphia for 5.5 years. So that was a transition from a corporate legal environment to a government environment. Then I went back to the law firm as chairman of the firm, and then I went to Comcast. I've left Comcast and I'm the U.S. ambassador to Canada. It takes some getting used to. One of the biggest things I feel is that the technology at Comcast is extraordinary. And the technology in the U.S. government is something a little less than extraordinary. So it takes some getting used to not having A+ technology for all the work that you're doing. Although, to be fair, the U.S. government has come a long way, and our technology is better now than it was 5 or 10 years ago.
Prior to your coming in as the ambassador of the United States to Canada, there was some strain in relationship between Canada and U.S. Just prior to the trade agreement between Canada, USA, and Mexico. But since your arrival, how have things changed, and what are the key result areas of success that you think has happened?
Well, one of the things I'm bound and determined to do is to get out of what we call the Ottawa bubble and to travel around Canada to meet Canadians where they live and work. So as I like to say, I've traveled over 105,000 kilometers. I've been to virtually every province and territory in Canada. I've been to hundreds of events and meetings. I've met thousands of Canadians. And I think I'm really learning the Canadian attitudes toward the United States, which vary by province. A Canadian who lives in Vancouver or in British Columbia has a different approach to energy than a Canadian who lives in Quebec. And so I'm learning that firsthand and meeting people. The one thing that has surprised me is how universal the feeling is about the breakdown of trust between Canada and the United States over the last 5+ years. Canadians, elected officials, media, but just normal, regular people ask me, what happened to our relationship? We used to be your friend. Did we do something wrong? And it hurt me to hear that, because I think one of the strengths of our relationship was our friendship, was our allyship, and there were some tough times, and I have made it a goal of mine, that relationship, and to talk to Canadians all the time, all around the country, about the importance of Canada and Canadians to the United States and the importance of having a close relationship with them. And we're seeing some improvement. A lot of that loss of trust is being rebuilt and is coming back, and Canadians are more comfortable by and large with the relationship again. And I think it is I think it is working to ensure that we do work together on trade, on defense issues, on intelligence issues, on entertainment-related issues, and it does bind us together better as partners and allies in North America.
You mentioned earlier about the word learning. Where did you acquire this thirst for knowledge in your childhood? I want to know a little bit about your parents and your upbringing. I know you are from New York originally.
I was born in New York, raised in New Jersey, went to college at Swarthmore, Pennsylvania, which is a suburb of Philadelphia.
Right.
It's where I met my wife in college. We actually met before law school, and in fact, we got married before we went to law school.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And we were married, we were younger than both of my kids are now, and my wife and I joke that if our kids came to us when they were 22 years old and said we're getting married, we would say, "What are you doing?" So we were very young when we were married, but somehow it's worked out well for us. But you know, I think your passion for learning comes partially from your DNA. I think it comes from your parents. I've always been intellectually curious. I'm still intellectually curious. I like to think that I'm what we call a lifelong learner. In any meeting, in any environment that I'm in, I always ask myself the question, what can I learn from being in this environment? And the more curious I remain and the more interested I am in listening and learning, as opposed to lecturing and talking, I think the more well-rounded I become and the more my intellectual curiosity gets satisfied.
You've made a great contribution through various boards that you were appointed, especially nonprofit organizations. By the way, my congratulations to you. In addition to your law degree, you were conferred an honorary doctorate twice, 2 LLDs, Doctor of Laws. So hearty congratulations.
These honorary degrees are pretty special because they're special for the example that you're setting for the young people in these colleges and universities.
You were the chairman of trustees of the University of Pennsylvania. So tell me a bit about that.
So the University of Pennsylvania is a school in the Ivy League, which is a group of the most prestigious universities in the United States, in the world. It was my primary nonprofit responsibility for many years. Within the University of Pennsylvania, there's a major health system. So I was actually chair of the trustees of the health system for about a decade before I became chair of the trustees of the university. And there's a special kick and a special responsibility that I feel being chair of the trustees of a prominent university like Penn, because we're passing on the values and the quality of higher education to the next generation. And I'm a big believer in the fact that education lifts individuals and lifts groups of people. Without education, it is hard to see people advancing in their careers and in their lives, and to be a part of a prestigious institution like Penn and spreading the quality of a Penn education through thousands of University of Pennsylvania students was incredibly important to me. And Penn did a number of things right. One of the things they did right was they have a need-based financial aid system, so that means when you apply for financial aid, how much financial aid you get, whether you qualify for financial aid, is based on your income, and then if you qualify, you receive enough financial aid to attend Penn without any further financial contribution by you. And at the time that I was chairman of the trustees at Penn, we converted. A lot of that historically was in the form of loans. And so you'd have kids graduating from college with hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt that they then have to pay off. Penn went to a all grant, no loan financial aid package for everyone who qualified for financial aid at the university. Which means that you don't graduate with any debt. And Penn was the largest, a number of schools did this, but Penn was the largest college or university that was all grant, no loan financial aid.
Now, Pennsylvania is also very famous for some of the greatest pharmaceutical firms, of international stature, such as, AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson. Their headquarters were there or located there strongly, manufacturing plants were there. And you were part of Penn Medicine. So tell me about that.
Well, Penn Medicine is the health system of the University of Pennsylvania, and it's an amazing healthcare institution, amazing research institution. It has the second largest NIH research budget of any university in the United States, and the inventions that have come out of Penn and Penn scientists are legendary. The most recent invention that everyone knows about is that two Penn physicians had a leading responsibility in isolating the mRNA delivery apparatus, which is the delivery for the COVID vaccine. And there were two Penn physicians who really led the efforts. A lot of other physicians were involved in mRNA research, but there were two Penn physicians that were really responsible at the end of the day for making mRNA available and having it work for the delivery of COVID vaccines.
You were on the board of directors and the executive committee of the Chamber of Commerce as well. So describe that for us.
Well, I'm a businessman, and I believe in the importance of business organizations working together.
Right.
I believe in the importance of businesses giving back to the community, and chambers of commerce are great advocacy organizations, and they're great organizations for figuring out how businesses can collectively work to improve people's lives. We were talking earlier about piracy in the television industry, in the movie industry, and the cable television industry. Well, a lot of the work that is done to combat piracy is being done by trade associations and chambers of commerce.
Wow.
And so they are collective organizations that enable us to attack some of the most difficult problems that individual businesses confront and might not be able to deal with by themselves. And so, think about ATN. Piracy is obviously a major problem for the networks. You can't take this on yourself. You want to be part of a group. And so whether it's the MPAA or chambers of commerce or your own nonprofit organizations that you form to create anti-piracy initiatives, the collective action is what's making whatever progress is being made in the anti-piracy efforts.
My congratulations to you about the Canada-USA-Mexico trade agreement, in which, from what I understand, there's some strong language with respect to copyright and trademark protection, fighting piracy aspects as well. We would love to maybe approach through you officially through the U.S. government to help the Canadian government become more aware of the seriousness of this matter, and perhaps you could help the whole industry, both in the United States and Canada, because it's a common problem, it's an international problem, and hope that can be done down the road someday.
Well, as we discussed, there's billions of dollars of value being stolen out of the system by piracy. And what's amazing to me is I think the vast majority of people don't even understand it. They may be buying a pirated cable TV box and they're watching it. They don't even know that they're stealing. If you were to tell someone, you're stealing $500 a year from the television creative community by doing this, they would look and say, stealing? What do you mean we're stealing? Well, you're not paying for content that you're supposed to pay for because someone has created some technology that enables you to steal that signal without paying for it.
Absolutely.
And when you tell people that, at least some people get upset about it. And it's why some of these public service announcement campaigns have had some impact on theft of cable television and of cable content, because most people don't want to be perceived as being thieves.
Absolutely.
And piracy is stealing, plain and simple.
Absolutely, sir. 100%. We agree with you, and God bless you for those statements. And I'm sure from your lips to God's ears, okay, at this stage. And I hope that the Canadian government would hear this, and strengthen. The laws are available, but they've just got to tweak it and make sure that they implement it. Other Commonwealth countries have done it, and other affluent nations, especially European Common Union, has already done it. United States has done it. So Canada cannot be far behind. So I hope that begins to happen here as well, sooner than later. On the artistic side, you did not spare, in your spare time, you were on the board of a theater company in Philadelphia. So I love this aspect of your interest in the theatrical market as well, art and culture. So tell me about it.
Yep. So I believe that art and culture is incredibly important to the fabric of a city or of a community. It's something that binds people together. It's a little bit like television in that you can make a powerful statement through a show, through a theatrical show or a concert or art in a museum. And so we practice in Mission Canada, we practice a lot of arts and culture diplomacy, where we bring people together using the arts to bring them together. And one of the things that's great about art is that it binds people together. It makes people feel good about working together and about being together. And we're in a troubled world where there's a lot of contention, but there's not contention around arts and culture. People feel better about themselves and about their communities when they've had a chance to see a show, to see a movie, to see a television show, to participate in an artistic endeavor. And so I think that building arts and culture and building access to theater, to film, to art, to sculpture is something that's very important to building society.
I've been told that you're a good friend of the President of the United States, and you were also a good friend of the previous presidents as well, right from the days of Barack Obama and others as well. So tell us a bit about the history.
I've been very interested and involved in politics for most of my adult life, and part of that involvement has been that I've had the privilege to be able to meet elected officials, senators, congressmen, mayors, governors, district attorneys, and presidents and vice presidents. And I have had a chance to meet a great many presidents, President Biden, President Clinton, President Obama.
Wow.
Have all been guests at my house. And I've had the honor of meeting and hosting events for all of those presidents, as well as President Bush, both President Bushes. And these presidents and elected officials, they're normal people, as well as being quote unquote famous. And when you get to know them, you get to know just how special they are as human beings, what their commitments are to the good of the American people and to the good of America. One of my favorite stories about President Bush is, people may or may not know this, but after he was president, he took up painting.
Wow.
And he's quite a talented painter. And you can go online and see his artwork that he now paints.
Wow.
So how special is that? That somebody who was the President of the United States has picked up painting as a hobby and is actually producing some really high quality artwork.
Talk of President Bush being a painter. What about you? What about your hobbies? What do you do?
I am not a painter.
In your spare time, what do you do?
So I hate to say this, and I don't mean to sound like a complete nerd, but my major hobby is my job.
Wow.
And I tell young people all the time that when you're picking your first job, when you're picking your job, pick something you're passionate about and something that you love. Because if you love your job, you'll never work a day in your life.
Fantastic.
And for every job I've had, and I've had a lot of them, I have loved my job. And so that is a big part of my leisure. On the other hand, I love my kids, and I have an opportunity to spend time with them and to do things with them. In Canada, one of our sons is up with us, and I've been able to take him to a couple of NHL hockey games.
Lovely.
We went to a curling competition. We've been to a couple of baseball games. So I'm a sports fan, and I mean, almost anything that I can do with my kids is something that is a pleasure for me.
When I was young, my father used to teach me something by saying, if you like what you're doing, work is worship.
I think it's the same as if you love your job, you'll never work a day in your life.
Absolutely.
It's the same sentiment.
What would your advice be for in the future for a greater, you mentioned earlier the team. I love the word, when you said a team approach. When you were at Comcast, my God, you had 186,000 employees. And it's amazing how to develop, with such a large, population of employees, that successfully you have developed a team approach. And I guess the same you could transfer to the government as well, because there it was a multi-billion-dollar business. Here with the Treasury, it's a multi-trillion-dollar business. But the principles are the same. So elaborate on that.
So I've already said I think that developing strong teams is the best way to motivate an organization, to get an organization to work well together. I don't care how big the overall organization is. If you can break it down into digestible teams, you'll have a more pleasant work environment. You'll have more success. And we have a lot of teams at Mission Canada as well. We have a lot of teams at Comcast. And it's just, if you can, as you said, hundreds of thousands of employees, how do you get to work with everyone? But if you can break it down into a working group of 50 or 100 people to take on a particular task, all of a sudden you're working, you get to know people, you have an opportunity to work together, and it gives you more of a hands-on feeling of making a difference.
It's been an absolute honor having you in the program with us. You're an extraordinary achiever. We look up to you on a pedestal, role model for a lot of youth here to listen to you. What would your advice be to the viewers, especially the younger generation, who are aspiring to either be in the corporate world or in the diplomatic corps someday?
Right. So my advice is pretty consistent no matter what it is you want to do. You always have to work hard. No success comes just because you hang around. So you have to work hard, find something to do that you're passionate about, because if you're passionate about it, you're likely to really devote yourself to it. As a young person, don't be afraid to make a mistake early in your career. Go someplace and try it out. If you don't like it, change jobs. Go somewhere else, and make sure you find something at the end of the day that you are passionate about. And I am a big believer that when you work in the private sector, and if you're fortunate enough to get a job that actually really pays money and that has a private sector focus on it, always remember to give back. Giving back is good for the soul. And if you're giving back to the community, you'll feel better about yourself, you'll feel better about your job, and the cumulative impact of all the young people watching this program, of all the young people we know, on improving society will make a real difference in the world.
What an honor to have you in the program with us, sir. Thank you so much, and God bless you.
Well, thank you.
And you and and Mrs. Cohen, we would love to have you back again.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here, and congratulations for what you've built. This is a huge Canadian success story with roots in diversity and inclusion, and just walking around this building, seeing the diversity of your employee base, seeing the diversity of your programming, you are making a difference, and congratulations on all of your success, and I look forward to seeing more growth from ATN in the future.
Sir, coming from you, that's a great compliment. We couldn't ask for anything more. Again, thank you so much for gracing and visiting our modest facility compared to what you are used to in your life. I'm talking about Comcast, one of the largest communication companies in the world.
I appreciate you saying that, but in the end, no matter how, so Comcast has $1.5 billion office building with a 4K studios in it, but it's still the same camera, still the same control rooms, it's still the same people talking to each other, still trying to produce content that appeals to a diverse audience. At the end of the day, we're in exactly the same business and trying to have exactly the same impact.
Sir, such an honor, and maybe, by God's grace through you, you might open some doors for us. Maybe we may want to, for the first time, come into the United States with some of the syndication of our programming and sort of propagate, as we've now learned, as the next generation grows in this part of the world, multilingualism may fade, but multiculturalism will still be strong. And I think, if there is a room for that, we would love that opportunity.
Well, that's great. Happy to try and talk and help.